I don't know, maybe I've bitten off more than I could chew with this cursed film stuff. Maybe there's actually something to this. Hey, look, the Jason episode was last week. I don't need any killers. Oh, fuck.
Pop Cult Pod Halloween special. It's to die for.
What the fuck? Okay. Welcome to the Pop Cult Pod, where apparently I've lost my body, or else I've lost my head. I'm not entirely sure of the terminology here. It's on a spike or a pike. I don't know the terminology. You don't think you need this stuff until you do. This is a shambles already. I mean, what the fuck, like? I was just minding my own business, some guy comes in, chops my head off. Rude. Rude is what it is. I mean, if you listen to the podcast frequently, you know, one of the things I constantly say is, if there's one time I want my body, it's Halloween. And here we are. Like, god damn it. I mean, all the equipment is set up already. I was ready to go before that guy came in. So I guess I should just keep going on with the show. My team here has put a laptop in front of me. You know, I can't control it. I mean, my body's over there. How's my body doing? Are we able to fix it? How's it going? Is it moving? No. Okay. Maybe we can check it during the show. I mean, it's just sitting there, man. Not good. Ugh. All right. Well, anyway. Welcome to Pop Cult Pod. I'm your headless host, Tom Pot. We have a lot of news to get to. This is our Halloween special. I had a lot of things planned. I had a choreographed dance number, fireworks. I can't do any of that now. I can't set off fireworks without hands. I can't dance without my feet. I can dance like a head, I guess. Does that work? No, it doesn't. Brilliant. Well, if there's one thing that will stay constant, it is that there's always going to be news, and that brings us to our new news.
Not just news. Not just new news. But the new.
Our first news story of the week is suitably Halloweeny, and that is that Tim Burton is bringing a live-action version of the Addams Family, so get used to hearing this music. Da-da-da-da. Oh, fuck. The only reason I wanted to do this story was so I could do the finger click thing, and I can't do it unless... Body? I'll try again. Da-da-da-da. No, that was just my mouth. Well, just move on. That's the only reason I want to talk about the story was so I could do the hand click, and now I can't do it. Oh, God. Well, another thing that's happening, that's returning. I'm so depressed, man. I can't even click my fingers. Fuck. I mean, one other thing that's returning are some of the actors from the DC Cinematic Universe. They're returning for Zack Snyder's Justice League, in case you weren't depressed enough. Yes, we got confirmation, seemingly this week. We got some confirmation this week. We actually missed it on their deadline for the last episode, that Jared Leto is apparently returning as the Joker. That's right. Your least favorite Joker is back, everybody. You know, in the role that made him infamous. I mean, at least I can make one noise that's funny. Honga honga. Right. You might remember him. He appeared in Suicide Squad and was generally derided as pretty bad in his performance. Pretty unusual in his behavior on set. He apparently said all sorts of used paraphernalia, I guess. I'm going to try to keep it clean. Along with dead rats and all bullets and all this sort of stuff to his cast members. So if you're involved in the Justice League Snyder Cut, keep an eye on your postbox. I'm sure you'll get some interesting stuff soon, and that way we will have official confirmation that Jared Leto is back as the Joker, which specifically Joe Manganiello, you're coming back as Deathstroke, so keep an eye on your postbox. I'm sure you'll get sent, I don't know, a doll who's burnt in half or something poetic that only a true artist like Jared Leto could understand, because he's method, baby. What else could he get sent? You could get sent half-eaten pear. What does that mean? Figure it out. The Joker gets it. Why don't you? I have no idea what I'm talking about. Well, I do know that I can talk clearly and say that those two characters are officially back in Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League. And at this point, can we just accept officially that the Snyder cut was never done? Like, he kept going, does it exist? Of course it exists. It feels like a pyramid scheme. Like, it was like, how much do you need to film? Oh, about 30 million. Now it's like costing 70 million. And now it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm bringing this actor in. Is that cool? What? It feels like It's like basically it feels like Lando Calrissian is Warner Brothers and Darth Vader is Zack Snyder, where it's like, oh, this deal gets worse all the time, and he's like, I've altered the deal, pray I don't alter it any further. They just keep piling on shit. Literal shit in the case of Jared Leto's Joker, which sucked. All jokes aside, I didn't like Jared Leto's Joker. There wasn't a lot of him in Suicide Squad to make a judgment, but what was there was not good. Maybe this is a second chance. I mean, again, it's obviously a second chance for Zack Snyder, so perhaps we could actually see, a decent Jared Leto performance. I don't know. Then again, we don't know how much they're filming. Apparently, it was only a week of reshoot, so I can't imagine it's much. Anyway, as I said, he wasn't involved in the original Justice League. I'm sure at some point Zack will say, oh, well, I had him in the storyboard. That was never going to happen in reality, but now it is. So, I don't know what to make of that. I assume it could possibly be in a flashback involving Batman. I mean, how would he tie into this big alien thing? It's like, oh, and the Joker, It's weird. Joe Manganiello as Deathstroke, we didn't really get to see any of him. He was in the end credit scene of the original theatrical cut of Justice League. He had already said that basically there was another, tease that Zack Snyder shot that wasn't in the finished film that will be in the Snyder Cut. But apparently they confirmed that he's going to film some new scenes as well. So that actually is something I am interested in, because obviously we didn't get to see Deathstroke in action, really. He was on a post-credit scene that's not going to go anywhere. So maybe if this is a success, it can go somewhere. Who knows? And he's got if you looked at one of his Twitch streams, Joe Manganiello had a ridiculous haircut, which made people kind of go like, yeah, that's probably for Deathstroke. And seemingly it is. So the saga that never ends. Zack Snyder's Justice League is adding 2 more actors. There was rumors that they wanted to try to get Harley Quinn involved. Maybe. Who knows? It seems like everyone's just back. It feels like they're just basically making a new movie. And apparently, I guess Warner Bros. Thinks it's a wise investment. So, anyway. Let's talk about another... Wait, I can make a better segue here. I can't do many things without a body, but I can still do amazing segues. I should say that... okay, I've got it. Right. So, I guess it was reported by the Hollywood Reporter, living up to their name, which certainly leaves some credence to it. And speaking of credence, my favourite Creedence Clearwater Revival song is Bad Moon Rising. And speaking of moon, this is amazing. I still got it, ladies and gentlemen. Moon Knight has seemingly been cast. Reported that Oscar Isaac, who of course we all know as Poe Dameron in the Star Wars movies, he's an Ex Machina, a million other things. Drive, most people forget he was in Drive. He is seemingly going to be Moon Knight for the Disney Plus series, which is, wow, that is an amazing get. It's like the first real casting announcement for the Disney Plus series that's made me go, okay, I can see these now being part of the cinematic universe. And Oscar Isaac is an amazing actor. A lot of people seem happy with this. Some people are a bit unsure. I will be honest, I haven't read any Moon Knight. I have a few graphic novels of Moon Knight that I haven't read yet, but it's a character I find very interesting from its basic concept, which, if you're not aware, the general idea is that Moon Knight, or Mark Spector, is a mercenary who has numerous alter egos that he kind of swap in and out of. Jake Lockley is a cab driver, for example. He changes to millionaire playboy Stephen Grant. He does these and all kind of to fight the criminals better, I guess. Later, he's established as being a conduit for the Egyptian moon gods, Khonshu. And more recently, they kind of revamped him. I think it was in a Warren Ellis series, where he was kind of a consultant dressed in all white who goes by the name of Mr. Knight. So it's an interesting character with a lot of range, apparently. Some people weren't too excited by Oscar Isaac. They think there should be a few other choices. I think especially one that caters to... Apparently Moon Knight is Jewish, I think. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to say he is or isn't. But apparently some people were thinking they might have had a more Jewish actor. But I don't know. I don't know Oscar Isaac's religion. I don't know Moon Knight's religion. So fine. On paper, I think, he's a good actor. Good work. I should say... reportedly, because it hasn't been confirmed officially, and that brings us back to a story we covered weeks ago, and that was the news that She-Hulk had been cast. Tatiana Maslany was going to play her from Orphan Black, and she came out and said that's not true. It was a press release that got out of hand. What do we make of that? A lot of, let's be honest, there's a history of actors in big comic book properties denying they're involved in the film and then being involved in the film. So maybe she's just playing it safe, because Marvel obviously haven't confirmed it yet. But I don't know. I think she's probably a She-Hulk. Same way, hopefully, at least Oscar Isaac will be Moon Knight. We got some other Moon Knight news. This is basically the last as well of the current slate of Disney Plus shows to kind of come together. We have, our details of Miss Marvel recently. Hawkeye, again, most of the pieces are in place for that. and She-Hulk as well. So what we do have now behind the scenes, Jeremy Slater, who created the Exorcist TV series for Fox, which I never actually saw, but was apparently quite good. Hey, speaking of Exorcist, I can still do plugs as ahead. I have a video on my review of The Exorcist for a new series called Upon Further Review. I've never seen The Exorcist before. Check it out, it's very different to my other stuff. It's kind of like a critical essay looking at the making of and why The Exorcist was scary or is scary, and answering the question, is it the scariest film of all time? Boom, in and out, that's my plug. I'm better. I don't need a body. I can do this for all time. I can be the headless host of podcasting. This could be a good gimmick. So speaking of, Jeremy Slater created the Exorcist TV series, which apparently was quite acclaimed, as I mentioned. And he also helped develop and co-created at least a TV series of The Umbrella Academy for Netflix, which, again, I haven't watched The Umbrella Academy, but I hear rave reviews, so this is a very good get. He's apparently going to be the lead writer and showrunner for this Moon Knight series, which is expected to come out in 2022. What that means, again, for season 3 of Umbrella Academy, I don't know, but maybe he can do double duty, maybe, who knows, we don't know how many episodes these series are, oftentimes it's a small episode order. We also got information about who's going to direct the series. A lot of these Disney Plus series have actually had just one director involved. I think that was the case with Falcon and Winter Soldier. Mohammed Diab, an Egyptian filmmaker, is expected to direct the series. Now, again, they're really going for people who it kind of makes sense to be involved in this. Of course, I mentioned Moon Knight is, gets his powers from being an Egyptian god, so Egyptian filmmaker. So maybe you could bring in some of that mythology. I don't know. Again, I don't know enough about Moon Knight, but on paper that sounds good. He is going to direct the series. We didn't hear about any other directors, so possibly he's going to helm all the episodes, whatever that is. And I mean, let's be honest, if we have someone the caliber of Oscar Isaac, maybe you only will get 6 episodes instead of a 10 or whatever. He has done a couple of different things. He wrote the successful blockbuster film The Island, or El Gazira, I'm probably mispronouncing that, which was one of the most successful Egyptian or Arab blockbusters ever, I think. I know they submitted it for a foreign Oscar. Egypt's pick for a foreign language Oscar. I don't think it was nominated though. He also had the film Clash that was selected for the Un Certain Regard for the Cannes Film Festival. So he's certainly got a reputation and seemingly, some pedigree, which is seemingly a good choice. I mean, it's hard to judge these because we haven't seen any of the Disney Marvel Plus shows yet, but on paper it looks like they're making all the right moves. But they need it because their streaming service, it kind of needs a bit of a boost, as all streaming services do. And one streaming service that's definitely got a boost, seamless transition, Netflix. Now, Netflix don't really need a boost, but they're certainly looking to get into the video game business because they obviously had The Witcher, which is a massive success, and now they're doubling down on that with video game series because they have announced a partnership with Ubisoft to create multiple series based around the Assassin's Creed property. And ranging apparently from live action series to animated series to anime series. So it seems weird to be like animated and anime. It's just like, okay, well, you're clearly going to whore this out a bit, aren't you? I would have thought that there'd be some crossover between the people who like anime and anime stuff. Anyway, I mean, I know I'm going to get hate mail for that, but anyway, no, I'm not. No one watches. The first series is already in development. No other details. Basically, it was just that those press releases that are just circle jerks where it's like, oh well, he's been working for ages making great video games. They're like, oh, they've been working ages making great content. And thus it goes on and on and on. But they said that the first series in development is an epic genre-bending live-action adaptation, which of course they did. Yeah, this is going to be the best show ever. Yeah, what else would they say? I don't know. My head's starting to hurt on top of this bike. Is my body doing better? Any over there? No? Still working on that? Did he move? Ah, fuck it. Well, there's one thing deader than my body right now, and it's Quibi, ladies and gentlemen. At long last, Quibi is dead. We heard about Quibi. We talked about Quibi very, very briefly. In fact, the most I talked about Quibi was probably on a test podcast for the video one, which you can check out on YouTube. It's officially dead. It seemed like it was dying for a long time, but officially the plug has been pulled on Quibi. So if you're just what is Quibi? Which a lot of people probably are because not a lot of people had it. It was a streaming service that emphasized short form content, which is where it got its name, which stood for Quick Bites, and it was Quibi, Quibi, which the idea was that you basically access films in 10-minute chunks, I think it was, and same with shows, 10, 11 minutes. I wonder why it failed. So this was headed up most notably by Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was a former Disney chairman. He founded DreamWorks alongside multiple other stuff. Really media mogul, this guy. And it was also basically ran by the former CEO of Hewlett Packard, Meg Whitman. You know, like the pedigree of this on paper, you're like, this seems too big to fail. But also, these are executives who have been around for a long time. They're now in their 60s, and this was a streaming service that was trying to cater to very young audiences. I wonder, does 60-year-olds know what young people want? Apparently not, because people didn't go for Quibi. But executives certainly saw potential in it, because they apparently invested $1.75 billion in investment capital, which is insane. And despite only launching in April, basically it's going to be dead apparently by December. There's no official date, but it seems like by December 1st, it's pretty much going to be gone. So they had sold already as well $150 million in advertising for their first year. They're not even going to make it their first year. And despite having quite a decent launch, I mean, it was certainly talked to it a little bit, not necessarily glowingly. I mean, the biggest reaction I got was that thing about a golden arm, which was apparently laughably bad. But again, there might have been more conversation if they had screenshotting and kind of engaged in social media, which they didn't until it was too late. So aside from that, even though it had a good launch, it fell out of the charts very quickly. I think it was out of the top 50 within like the first week. Regardless, it just didn't have a good level of users, active users, really. And at first, like really lazily, you kind of almost see the writing on the wall. As soon as things went wrong, they were like, oh, well, this is because of the coronavirus. Yeah, because, you know, nobody's streaming anything with coronavirus. Tiger King was a big success from that. Anyway, they were saying that basically like their business model was that you would watch it on a commute to work with your phone, which is so specific. I mean, yeah, you probably that shouldn't have been your business model, to be honest. So because of that, they blame coronavirus, which, you know, bollocks. They eventually scrambled to try kind of adapt to what was going on in the world. Like, they allowed you to watch it on your TV, which they didn't at the beginning, which is insane. It wasn't on like Amazon Fire or I can't remember what Apple TV is it, or I don't know, Roku. Roku is the one thing. I'm sorry. And because of that, you weren't really able to watch it on TV. And you were eventually. They did roll that out finally by casting it, which again, probably not the best way. There's probably should have been ways around that. Really. They also eventually allowed you to screenshot stuff. Again, it was a bit too late. No one was talking about it at that point except to point and laugh at it. I mean, there's amazing articles on this where you can see how out of touch they were. Like, they had Gal Gadot in. Like, imagine having someone the talent and caliber of Gal Gadot, like a big name in. And whatever, she was like, I want to pitch a show about it's just the juxtaposition here is amazing. She wanted to pitch a show about amazing like women in history, I think. And Jeffrey Katzenberg was like, oh, we can get you to do workout videos like Jane Fonda. Yeah, you know, Jane Fonda workout tapes, that's something the kids are interested in. That's a good selling point. And I'm sure Gal Gadot was really happy with that idea, that you came in to pitch something and you were like, hey, how about you do some exercise? I put on that voice, even though he definitely doesn't talk like that, but I'm imagining him chomping a cigar through this whole thing. It just never came together for Quibi. It's not surprising when you hear about it. It was just people that were out of touch. They had more money than they knew what to do with. There is essentially, like, let's be honest, we're quickly reaching saturation point with streaming services. And you need a sort of a hook. And when your hook is, you can't watch as much of this as you can other streaming services. When it's like, hey, you can only watch 10-minute chunks of this, it's like, Like, a lot of streaming services have succeeded on that binge model. And you're saying, like, oh, yeah, well, you can only do it in 10-minute chunks. Not a great business model, not a good hook to build your service on, really. And also, it just seems like the content they had wasn't very good. I think I went through a list of the stuff they had before. It was never any good. The only thing that they had that made me kind of go like, oh, was they had that thing Die Hard, a Kevin Hart kind of movie that looked decent. But again, they were like, it's coming out in 10-minute chunks. So I was like, nope. I'm sure you could watch the whole thing now anyway. And they also had Reno 911, the revival, which apparently was quite good despite the limitations. But there you go. You also should point out that we don't even know how many users they had, despite having like over 1 million users at launch. And a lot of people had a free trial as well. Some of them had a year free trial, which it's a good thing that was free, isn't it? They apparently only had 8% of users. Now they've, as in when I say 8% of users, it means that only 8% of users hung around after their trial had expired and actually signed up for a service. They've disputed that, but who knows really? I mean, certainly it doesn't matter. It's not a success. So there were reports before. I didn't actually mention it because I just wanted to see how it would play out. That they were trying to sell the company. I think they approached Facebook and possibly Google and Netflix, maybe even Amazon. They probably approached everyone. Let's be honest. About buying kind of the company. Now the thing is with Quibi is they don't own their content either, so you wouldn't be getting the content necessarily. I don't think, but I don't know how that would work. I'm sure legally there probably is a way around that. They apparently had 200 million in funding, but they decided to shut down. Jeffrey Katzenberg stated there was no question that keeping us going was not going to have a different outcome. It was just going to spend a whole lot more money without any value to show for it. So out of respect for these people that put up this extraordinary capital to do it, that's irresponsible, and we both felt we shouldn't do it. Which, hey, I've mocked Jeff Katzenberg in the past. I've heard he's a kind of a very petty kind of prick, but fair play to him for kind of owning up and saying, look, we're not going to succeed. We're running into the ground. Let's give some of the investors back their money, which, hey, I mean, at least he owned his mistake. I was kind of waiting for him to come out and be like, oh, this damn virus again. We would have succeeded if it wasn't for that pesky virus. This is the part where I would be shaking my fist, Spotty. Oh, who put a pumpkin on his head, man? I mean, topical. Thematically, it works. But come on, show some respect. Can't even go over there and fucking slap the guy who did this. That motherfucker. Anyway, sorry, this is a bit of a train wreck, but you know what you expect when I've lost my head. Regardless, Quibi is gone. We don't know what's going to happen to the content involved in it. As I said, according to their deals, Quibi didn't own the content and they would actually be free to shop it elsewhere after a few years. It was kind of an exclusivity deal, is my understanding. So maybe we'll see some of this pop up elsewhere. It also leaves a lot of, content in limbo. Stuff they were working on, stuff that was, being made, stuff that was greenlit. Who knows if that stuff goes anywhere? It's certainly not going to succeed if you had a green light from Quibi, but I guess you have to try again elsewhere. But anyway, some stuff isn't going to get made. Some of the stuff would likely be delayed. But, oh, did you say delay?
Have a little patience.
Yes, we're back with, hey, did you say delay? Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Sorry. Please, I hope I get my head back in my body. Well, back on topic, and let's try to put a smile on that face, to quote the Joker. Great role model to quote here. I'm sure, it's Halloween. Plenty of people are dressed as Joker, and they're stuck inside their house, just looking out at the world. Well, if you were stuck inside your house, you were probably waiting for a new video game to play, and come November 19th, you were saying, hey, Cyberpunk 2077, I'm all in, baby. And now you're going to have to wait, because once again, CD Projekt Red have decided to delay Cyberpunk 2077 for the third time. It was meant to come out in April, it's meant to come out in September, it was meant to come out in November. And now it is meant to come out December 10th to be specific. So they pushed it 3 weeks, essentially. I'm struggling with how to feel about this. I'm not going to lie, Cyberpunk 2077 I thought looked really good, but I wasn't necessarily in a rush to play it. I'm not a big RPG player, but I did want to get this at some point. I did want to play it. And again, if the reviews were good, I probably would have got it opening weekend at least. Or launch day, I guess. You won't say opening day unless it's a movie, I guess. And it's really hard to stay excited for this now, isn't it? It's like, because if you're following the development of this, there's a lot of features that were promised that they've had to remove to basically get the game to work and be on time. We, of course, had the really controversial thing where they were like, where the game is finished, we're just cleaning up some bugs, and we're just basically not going to do crunch time. And then they're like, okay, we're actually going to do 6 weeks of crunch time. And now, of course, it's 9 weeks at least. And that's, again, it's caused a fierce debate on the internet, which is really, honestly, it's just showing me how much I hate the internet. Because if this was any other company, if this was an EA product, for example, aside from CD Projekt Red, there would be people bitching about crunch time. But of course, since it's the beloved makers of The Witcher 3, it was, oh, well, it's just overtime. I work hard at my job. Dude, like, it was, they even said it was like, I think they said it was like voluntary overtime. But we all know it's like, hey, voluntary overtime, oh, we are not going to do it? Well, we'll find someone who will, because it's a cutthroat industry, this video game business. I just think is the game worth this? And pushing it 3 weeks, are we just going to be coming back in a couple more weeks saying, hey, it's delayed until 2021? Why keep dating the game? And this kind of reminds me of Tenet in a way where they just kicked it down a couple of weeks down the calendar. Just pull it from the calendar. Okay? The game has already gone gold, by the way. It's like they waited for the game to go gold, and then they were like, no, you don't. It just seems a mess. And it's certainly, like, as someone who was interested in this game, it certainly hurt my interest, but I guess there's more hardcore fans or it hasn't deterred them, but certainly, I don't know how anyone could look at this and say that this is going to be a decent game at launch. I think this is going to come out and be a buggy mess, to be honest. I think, like, I'm guessing there's going to be a massive patch on the opening thing, which means that you probably have to install it for hours. But yeah, it just doesn't really breed confidence, does it? We'll see how it turns out, I guess. But yeah, it's not a great thing. I mean, other video games have been affected as well recently. Ubisoft had Rainbow Six Quarantine. I think that was the name of it, which made me go like, huh, that's a convenient name, isn't it? That got delayed. It was meant to come out, I can't remember when, but now it's not coming out until later on in 2021. Same with Far Cry 6. It's now been delayed as well. They kind of said, like, yeah, we could reach the release dates, but it just isn't feasible with COVID and Corona going on. So, not COVID and Corona, they're the same thing. But anyway, from video games to video game movies, Tomb Raider, the sequel, that's not its official title, has also been affected by COVID. A sequel to the Alicia Vikander movie, which was actually surprisingly good, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, video game movies. I mean, that's not saying it was a great movie, it was fine, but the bar is low. Essentially, this is meant to start production by now, I think, and now it's not going to start production until early 2021, which, it was also meant to come out in early 2021, so that was a problem. And because of that, they have removed it from the calendar. Originally, it was slated to come out March 19th next year. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So they've taken it from the calendar with no date in sight. I can't say with certainty. I think there's going to be movies like Tomb Raider, and I'm not saying Tomb Raider is going to be one of them, that were slated to go in front of cameras that haven't, that are going to be removed from the calendar and never discussed again. There's going to be a lot of films, I think, cancelled out of this COVID thing because they're at a point where they're losing a lot of money and they won't want to put out anything that's not a surefire hit. So that's Tomb Raider, Tomb Raider the sequel, whatever we're going to call it. Who knows what the story is with it? Maybe next year it'll get to filming and maybe it'll come out eventually. But for now, at least, it doesn't have a slot and we don't have any more information on it, aside from the fact that it's hoping to film next year. Another film that we got, and it's so strange for me because this is a movie where I think we must be coming up on a year now that we got the first trailer for it. Ghostbusters Afterlife. And yet, here we are with months and months and months to wait. And of course, that's going to be the case all over. It's just so weird seeing a trailer for a movie and then being like, hey, wasn't this meant to come out a year ago? And then you're seeing a trailer for a movie like 2 years before the movie actually comes out, which, anyway. Ghostbusters Afterlife had been delayed already. I think it was meant to come out this October. Then it was, was it summer? I don't know. Was it August maybe? It doesn't matter because it was meant to come out in March of 2021, and now it has been pushed to June 8th, 2021, which is strange enough. Well, not strange, I guess they did this on purpose. The opening weekend of the original Ghostbusters back in 1984. I say strange, and I say like they planned on that, and they obviously did. But is that really something that kind of will get you into, like, is that just someone being a bit OCD, you know? I don't think that really makes, like, people aren't going to like, oh, hey, this was the opening weekend of Ghostbusters, and there's another one! I mean, the people who saw Ghostbusters opening weekend, at what age are they? By the time this comes out, they'll probably be in their 50s. I don't know if they're necessarily in a rush to go see Ghostbusters Afterlife. I could be wrong. Apologies to any 50-year-olds out there. I'm sure at 50 years old, I'll be going to see Ghostbusters 7 or whatever. But anyway, that was, hey, did you say delay? Someone said delay. A lot of stuff is delayed. I'm sure there'll be a lot more stuff to be delayed. But one thing we can be sure of is that there is going to be movies in the future, no matter how shit or good they are, no matter how they are released. And they keep telling us that because they put out bad trailers for probably some bad movies. And the first trailer I'm going to talk about certainly is one of that when we get to the trailer trash.
This is the theme for trailer
This is the theme for trailer. This is the theme for trailer trash. Get in the bin.
Get in the bin.
Boy, that trash moniker has never been more appropriate than this trailer, which... Oh. We got a trailer for the movie Songbird, which is produced by Michael Bay and directed by a guy, I think his name's like Addam. I didn't even bother learning his name. He's a nobody. Basically, this is a Michael Bay production. And it is a movie that is about the future where COVID has basically continued. They've gone from COVID-19 now to COVID-23. And it's running entirely rampant and people are dying. And it poses this kind of reality where, oh, there's government lockdowns. We've been in lockdowns for 200-something weeks. And if you're infected, we're going to shoot you on sight. And in other words, it's anti-mask bullshit propaganda. They turned it into a horror film and an action movie, which, like, I can't think of a movie that would be more tasteless than this. Like, we're still in the middle of this. Numbers are going up in some parts of the world again. And meanwhile, they're like, let's make a horror movie about how the government are controlling us. And I guarantee you there's probably going to be a twist at the very end of this where, like, it's some billionaire behind the whole thing or China's behind the whole thing. It's a biological weapon or some bullshit. It's a conspiracy theory film, basically, that's disguised as an action movie. And I was so disappointed to see some of the actors involved in this because there's some big names in there. And I guess they were just like, hey, we can't work right now. Oh, there's a movie? I'll totally do it. Because it was filmed, it took like a less than a month to film. It was started filming in July, I think, and finished filming in August. And I should also mention, in case there was any more evidence needed that they didn't necessarily care about COVID protocols, at one point SAG, after the acting union, said that no one was allowed to be part of this production if they were a union member because they weren't following protocols. Because I guess, according to Michael Bay and this Addam guy, whoever he is, following protocols is basically living under martial law and rise up and get shot. And even if I put that aside, how tasteless and trashy making a movie about this thing when we're in the middle of it still is, it just is a dull-looking movie. This looks like it could have easily just been an action movie or horror film that was reskinned to put this stuff on it, and it just doesn't look interesting. It's that kind of thing again where half of it looks like it's probably shot on phones or in a room because of the whole thing going on. It's shit. I watched the trailer. I have no intention of watching the movie. Everyone's talking about it at the moment because of how poor and tasteless it is, and rightly so. I think this is a trailer that I actually was, I won't say offended, but I just was like, wow, that is just read the fucking room, dude. Anyway, I actually wasn't even going to do trailer trash until that trailer came out. And then I said, there's no way I can just do that movie. I need something as a palate cleanser. I need trailers that might be decent to kind of raise my spirits a bit. And thankfully, there was two of them. Because why go at Michael Bay action movies / horror movies when you could find actual decent horror films that look like they're going to be a bit of fun? And that's what I got in the trailer for Freaky. Now, I'll be honest. I hadn't heard of this movie until today. And it wasn't because the trailer dropped. I was watching TV and they played a TV spot for it. And the TV spot, I thought, that looks very charming. And I like the plot of it. So the basic idea of this, and this is where it takes its name from, is that this is a body swap horror movie where a teenage girl is body swapped with a serial killer played by Vince Vaughn. So the teenage girl is in the serial killer's body, the serial killer is in the teenage girl's body, and it's just excellent looking. It's a lot of fun, but it looks like there's also suitable horror in it. I just love that concept. It's such a great idea. So you basically have the teenage girl who the police are looking for, basically having to go on the run, while you have the teenage girl killing her friends because it's the serial killer. And I fell in love with this movie. I actually cannot wait for this movie now. And that's why I was so disappointed, because I was like, oh, horror, it's perfect. It's got to come out around Halloween, right? No. And to be fair, if this was any other time where there wasn't like a global pandemic going on, in other words, if you had the normal slate of horror Halloween movies, I'd be fine with this, but I would have loved if we got this for Halloween. But regardless, they said, hey, Freaky, as in Freaky Friday. So if you're going to bring out a movie on Friday, what better time than Friday the 13th? It's coming out the 13th of November. about 2 weeks from now. I can't wait. It's going up on demand. It looks so much fun. It was a great trailer. I'm really excited for this movie now. Again, that's what a good trailer should do. Or if you're Michael Bay, you can just say, ha ha ha, don't stay in your houses, masks are for pussies. Yeah, blah blah blah. Anyway. I'm sorry, was that too close to me being a Joe Rogan podcast? If Spotify want to pay me $100 million, I'd just, crack me a check. I mean, my first episode was had Joe Rogan in the title, which could I go back and change that? Could I do like a George Lucas or a Spielberg in ET? Could I go back and change it? And who could I change Joe Rogan's name to? Bill Burr? Who's a big podcaster? I don't know. Anyway, maybe I should just take his name out. I should just censor it. You were like, what? I'm coming for you, ... I don't know. Anyway, we also got this trailer. I wasn't going to talk about this, but again, I needed to cleanse my palate. We got a very brief clip of Halloween Kills, which, again, one of those cases where we're like, oh, this looks awesome. Oh, we got to wait a whole year. Blumhouse are kind of doing a horror fest online, so they showed off the latest Michael Myers sequel. It's only about 30 seconds, but it was really, really good. It looks like Haddonfield is starting to kind of fight back and try to kill Michael, which I just love the look of. There's some nice gory kills in here. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and while my anticipation has gone down for a lot of films because of the whole COVID thing, I think my anticipation for this one has actually gone up. So, I don't know. I know the guy, the Blumhouse guy, basically said, like, we're releasing next year, pandemic or not. Which was like, oh, okay. I think he was hoping that people would be like, yeah, but instead people were like, geez, I mean, if it's very bad next year, that's a bit irresponsible, isn't it? But hopefully things will be a bit better. Anyway, here I am, just ahead. Where did it all go wrong? I'm starting to feel like I'm cursed. Well, I'm not cursed. I mean, the guy who shot my head off, I could probably guess who it is and their reasoning, which I might get into it some days, but how are we getting on with my body? Okay, wait. I think they're saying they might be able to fix it. So, come back in a sec. We're going to do our feature on cursed films. And hopefully, when they come back, my head is going to be fixed. Here we go. Okay, now my head is in a crystal ball. Brilliant. That's exactly what I meant. When I said you could fix it, I thought you could actually put my head on my body, not just put my head in a big crystal ball. I mean, I'm sure I look very wise, but can we try to figure this out? Like, I don't want my head to just be in a jar like an episode of Futurama for the rest of my life. Anyway, that brings us to our feature this week, which I can definitely relate to at the moment, and that is curses. That's right, cursed films. We're going to talk about six most cursed films in cinema history, at least in my opinion and in my research, I guess. We should kind of determine what makes a film cursed, why people consider it a curse. It's normally mysterious circumstances, tragedy, or things that basically have kind of eerie coincidences to them, and certainly a lot of these films have that explanation for them. Speaking of explanations, we're going to go through each of the 6 films, and first of all, I'm going to, at the end, rank all 6 films, 1 to 6. Number 1, of course, being the most cursed. I guess that's the best cursed film, or maybe the worst cursed film. I guess it kind of depends on what thing you're going for, really. And then we're also going to look at number 1, whether a film has an explanation behind it or whether it needs an exorcism. So each film will decide explanation or exorcism, and at the very end, we'll rank them. So we're getting started with a film that seems kind of definitely very fitting to be in this list of cursed films, but also one that kind of stands out because it's not strictly a horror film like so many of these are. We're talking about The Crow. The Crow was a property based on a comic book that was always birthed from misery. It was a comic created by James O'Barr to cope with the death of his fiancée who was killed by a drunk driver, and as much as he hoped that it would give him catharsis, if you ask him, it basically just led to further self-destruction. It's a very dark comic that was born from the darkness, and that certainly continued, as we will see when we talk about The Curse of the Crow. Firstly, we should say that before filming even began, allegedly, there was a voice message on the production office's answering machine that told them to not make the movie, a foreboding warning of things to come. An electrician on the very first day was seriously electrocuted when his cherry picker that he was driving hit a power line. Eventually, he got so severely injured that he lost the use of his ears. Also on the first day, one of the producers was involved in a car accident and an equipment truck mysteriously caught fire. Mysteriously definitely is going to help this film if we're talking about a curse. We should also say it wasn't the only issue we had with cars. A disgruntled worker drove through the plaster shop of the film, assuming because he was fired. And on set, there was another issue when a construction worker, drove a screwdriver through his hand. Now, some things that are maybe less work-related, a drive-by shooting occurred very close to the set of the film, and Ernie Hudson's brother unfortunately passed away towards the end of production. But one of the other major issues that production ran into was that they were hit by the storm of the century, destroying many, many sets, meaning the cost of this film just absolutely ballooned. It wasn't long before people picked up on the idea that The Crow was actually cursed, and by April 93, Entertainment Weekly had run a story on just that, The Curse of the Crow, which is where basically we got our name for what is considered one of the most cursed films of all time. The production coordinator of the film, Jennifer Roth, unfortunately and somewhat presciently announced, "I don't think this is exceptional. We have a lot of stunts and effects. I've been on productions before where people have died." And unfortunately, The Crow would be one of those productions. However, the alleged curse of the Crow might actually be part of a larger curse, the curse of the Lee family, which some say was a curse that befell the male side of the Lee family. Of course, Bruce and Brandon Lee both died quite young, and some would say rather mysterious and strange deaths. If you believe this legend, it says that Bruce's parents, Brandon's grandparents, had a son that was their firstborn who died in childbirth, and they believed it was because a demon stalked the males of their family. And not only that, because of this, Bruce Lee was often dressed as a girl, and for some time, he actually attended an all-girls school. Now, one of the things that's also interesting is that a lot of this myth has come from the film Dragon, a biopic on Bruce Lee. Now, in that film, the curse is depicted as a demon, and in that film, the demon is shown once it's done with Bruce, following Brandon Lee. And what's even more terrifying is that this was shot and ready to go before Brandon Lee had passed. An oddly prescient piece of cinema. But it's not the only eerie similarity that we see between Bruce and Brandon Lee's death. Because Bruce's final role was in a film called Game of Death, and in that film, Bruce's character is killed when blank bullets are said to be in a gun, and an assassin swaps those bullets out with actual bullets, killing the character in the film. Which, of course, would unfortunately be the fate that Brandon Lee would die of a few years later. Which we should probably discuss, because it is the thing that everyone talks about when they talk about The Curse of the Crow, the untimely death of Brandon Lee. And what exactly happened here? So they were filming a scene in which the Crow, the character of Eric Draven, enters an apartment where he sees his fiancée being beaten and raped, at which point he is fired upon. While the crew watched Lee fall to the ground, they were initially unaware that he had been shot in the abdomen. A fatal accident that had occurred on the set of The Crow now left its lead actor, Brandon Lee, dead. So this is rather confusing. It does have a conclusive answer, and I'll do my best to explain it, but hopefully I don't fall short. Oftentimes on sets you hear of blank rounds. These are bullets that don't actually have a bullet inside them. They replace the bullet with paper or plastic wadding, and as such there's no projectile actually fired. However, you can also have dummy rounds. Now, dummy rounds do contain a bullet, but they've had the primer or the explosive charge at the back of the bullet removed, meaning that they can't really propel forward. Now, you might say, why would they use one instead of the other? Well, dummy rounds give a more realistic look when they're in a gun, because they actually have a bullet on top of the gun. So if you were seeing, for example, a revolver, which they used on the set of The Crow, it looks far more realistic. So for one of the scenes, they had a close-up of a revolver, and because of that, they used blank rounds, which made the gun look a lot more realistic. And the primer, the explosive charge that propels the bullet forward, is meant to be removed, but because of time constraints, the crew of The Crow, maybe I should say, that sounds slightly better, forgot to remove one of the primers. Now, what this did is that it forced the bullet out, but it didn't actually force the bullet all the way out of the gun. It actually just pushed the bullet into the barrel of the gun, where it was lodged halfway. Now, this is where the Brandon Lee scene comes in. So remember, right now, the blank rounds are being introduced into the gun. The dummy rounds, which were introduced first, that have actual bullets but should not have any force to propel themselves, are out of the gun. Except for the one dummy round that is lodged in the barrel of the gun. Now, if someone had checked this properly, they would have seen that there's no light coming through the barrel of the gun, and as a result, there must be something lodged there, but nobody checked the gun. They then put in their blank rounds. Now, the blank rounds don't have a bullet, but they do have the primer, which is meant to push and propel something out of the barrel of the gun. And in the moment, there is a bullet lodged in the barrel of the gun because of the aforementioned dummy rounds. So on the set of the Crow, the ammunition is swapped to the blank rounds. And they use these, of course, because they produce a sound and a flash. There's not meant to be any projectile. But that fatal bullet was still in the middle of the gun barrel. So when they shot the blank round, a bullet came out of the gun at roughly the same force that a regular bullet would have come out. Essentially, the blank round had enough force to push the dummy round out of the barrel of the gun and into Brandon Lee. They cut a lot of corners here. The firearms expert was sent home early, meaning it was there for the prop assistant who didn't check the gun or probably wasn't even aware that you needed to do that. And as a result, Brandon Lee was killed. Despite doctors' best effort, he was mortally wounded. There's plenty of conspiracy theories, as there are with a lot of these, as to whether or not it was a mafia hit, whether there was some sort of curse or a million of other reasons, but generally speaking, it was ruled an accident. It looks like it was mostly probably incompetence and negligence on the set of The Crow. So when it comes to our explanation, is it an explanation or does it need an exorcism? In other words, is there a rational explanation for this or is there something supernatural at play? And I think in this case, it's very much the case that there is an explanation. In fact, I'm talking about cursed films. There's an excellent series on Shudder at the moment called Cursed Films, and they go through exactly what happened on the set of The Crow. Specifically how the bullet whole thing played out. And as much as it's very hard to explain, I'm sure I made a total balls of it there. If you watch their explanation on it, it's very succinct, and it really shows and really explained to me for the first time that I actually understood how this accident happened. And once I saw that, it was very clear that there is a rational explanation for this. As upsetting as it is, I don't think The Crow can definitively be said to be cursed, at least in a supernatural sense. And we could also look at the Lee family curse, which is interesting, but it seems rather romanticized. Unfortunately, it seems more likely that Brandon Lee was a victim of incompetence, and it was a very stressed production with The Crow. Of course, they were over budget at times. They had to, they were over budget. They were often taking far too long, majorly because of sets being destroyed and all that kind of thing. And as a result, corners were cut, and because of that, it cost a man his life. So I'm leaning more towards this being an explanation instead of actually an exorcism being needed. We can talk about curses all we want, but right now, we're about to cross into the Twilight Zone. In 1983, Steven Spielberg and John Landis decided they wanted to adapt a classic TV series into a movie. To do this, they wanted to make an anthology film, so they gathered some of the best 70s and 80s directors that were there. And we should remember that directing back then in the 70s and 80s was pretty punk rock. The reason a lot of these directors came to prominence was because they were breaking certain cinematic conventions, because they were kind of rebels in a certain way. But unfortunately, one of the ways that kind of comes across can always be a lack of professionalism and outrageous conduct. And that sort of style made them fantastic directors, but also it could often lead to a set being rather dangerous, which was the case with the Twilight Zone. They were true auteurs of cinema, for better and for worse. So the directors they got involved were, of course, Spielberg, George Miller, Joe Dante, and notably for the discussion, John Landis. John Landis was seen as a slightly reckless director before in the production of the film. For the basis of his discussion on the curse, we're only really going to discuss the only element that anyone ever discusses in the mention of the Twilight Zone being cursed, because aside from this, there's not much else to say, and that is the unfortunate Twilight Zone helicopter deaths. They were shooting a scene that was incredibly complex. It involved Vic Morrow running under a helicopter while explosions were set off, carrying 2 children. Essentially, the story of this segment was that his character was racist, and because of Twilight Zone shenanigans, he kind of sees what it's like with the shoe on the other foot. He witnesses what it's like to be discriminated against and has a change of heart by the end of the film. So in this segment, he was meant to carry 2 Vietnamese children to safety during a moment where he's being attacked by American troops because he's now seen as the enemy. Filming with children on sets can be rather tricky. You can't keep them too late at night, and that was the case with the Twilight Zone. They couldn't film with kids, but they wanted a legitimate night scene, and that led to problems. And because of that, they basically took a 7-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl from the street that didn't have any work permits to film these scenes. It was one of many instances where labour laws were broken on the set of the Twilight Zone. In fact, after the unfortunate accidents that we'll get to, many of the child labour laws on film sets would be radically changed. Landis didn't even seek a special waiver because if he got that, he might have been able to film late, but he was worried because the scene involved explosions and a helicopter that he wouldn't get that permission, so he did not seek out that waiver. He also paid the children under the table so he could get around these laws. Parents were also not even made aware of what the scene involved at first. They weren't told about helicopters, they weren't told about explosions, but they were told that it would be safe once they found out. And once they heard of this, the casting director actually voiced their concerns, but those concerns fell on deaf ears. And other people on set didn't even show that level of concern. They lied to some people that the children were in the scene, and they actually at one point hid the children from a welfare officer. The scene was a very physically demanding one, something that Vic Morrow was actually aware of. He basically voiced his concern before filming. He said, "Why am I doing this? I should get my double to do this." And even in rehearsal, it seemed that it was very physically demanding, and the parents of the kid were again told this was not a dangerous scene. And when you see the footage, which unfortunately there is footage of this accident out there, it was played all over the news and would be for years while this court case was eventually figured out, it's clear to see that he's struggling. Now, when they tested this without actors and helicopter, the helicopter was actually rocked by explosions, and according to the pilot, it was alleged that Landis said at one point, "You ain't seen nothing yet," indicating that he was probably going to be even more violent with explosions for the actual scene. It was the final day of shooting and the final scene. The helicopter is in flight and Vic and the kids are running through water. The helicopter is above their head, and the helicopter is hit by a mortar effect. And while there's some argument about the placement of the helicopter, it leads to the rotor on the tail of the plane to fail, and the helicopter to fall. And as Vic Moore tries to retrieve one of the dropped kids from the water, the helicopter's blade decapitates him and one of the kids. And the other kid is crushed by the weight of the helicopter. If there's any solace to be taken from any of this, it's said that their death was instantaneous. There's been long disagreements about whose fault this is, from whether the effect that caused the failure occurred too early. Landis insisted apparently that the helicopter fly lower, which he was told already was unsafe, and that if he did so they might lose the helicopter, but parents insist in the court case that followed that he asked that the helicopter lower, and as a result perhaps he is to blame, but he insists it wasn't entirely his fault, and he will be eventually acquitted of manslaughter. Regardless of the reasoning, the helicopter was too near the explosion, and what would follow would be a decade of litigation and changes to laws to make filming safer, and for the families of those involved to finally get some sort of justice. This is an incredibly upsetting thing, and a lot of people point to it as a curse because it's so horrible. But it's the only instance where we could really point to something going wrong on the set of the Twilight Zone. Of course, unfortunately, it was go drastically wrong. But if we come to the question of is there an explanation or does it need an exorcism, there is an explanation for this, as sad as it is. It's open and shut. There's nothing else about the film that could have even contributed to the idea of a curse. It's just a totally avoidable tragedy. In fact, Spielberg and Landis were good friends, and Spielberg essentially said after this that it forced him to grow up. He wasn't friends with Landis anymore after this. He said that there's no reason that someone should die for any film. No film is worth someone's death. And if you ask me, this just stems from negligence and disregard for safety, and I honestly feel like Landis should have seen jail time for this, and he possibly isn't the only one. There's a grim explanation for this, and because of that, I have to say there's probably not a cursed film in the Twilight Zone. One of the better known cursed films, though, is of course The Exorcist. I guess I can plug this, even though I'm ahead. It might be my last video. I don't know how I'm going to make videos without a body, but I currently have a video out, if you want to check it out, called Upon Further Review, where I look at The Exorcist and decide, is it really the scariest film of all time? It's a lot of fun, very different to my other videos. Check it out, it's on YouTube at the moment. Anyway, back to our feature. The Exorcist is often kind of said to be one of the more cursed films out there. It was actually partly sold and marketed on that idea that it was controversial and taboo, and it kind of helps when you see that the film might be cursed. And there's certainly evidence that mysterious happenings did occur on the set, and as a result, maybe this film is cursed. Firstly, sets caught fire, and most of the sets were destroyed, except for the set of Regan's bedroom, which of course is where most of the possession takes place, where the priests bless at times. Maybe that could be a reason why it wasn't destroyed. Jason Miller, who plays Father Karras, was warned by a priest that if you try to unveil the devil, he will do everything in his power to prevent it. A very frightening warning, certainly to get from a priest. There was also a priest called in to bless the set, and we should say that Exorcist is also apparently responsible for a lot of deaths. According to Ellen Burstyn, 9 people in total died during the production of The Exorcist. Among them, Linda Blair's grandfather, Jack McGowan, who plays Burke Dennings, died shortly from influenza, shortly after the film comes out at 54. Vasiliki Malaros, who plays Karras' mother, he dies very shortly after. Max von Sydow's brother dies on the first day of filming. The assistant cameraman had a child that died. The night watchman died, apparently, of the set. And a special effects expert also died. Now, whether or not it's just a strange coincidence, we don't know, but Max von Sydow brushes this off as just being a case of a long production, and as a result, people's lives are bound to change. It's not a very rational explanation for Max von Sydow. And considering his brother is one of the people that died, maybe we should take that into consideration. And one of the things we should also mention is that William Friedkin is a very aggressive director. He has a very confrontational and controversial style. And because of that, sometimes we can't necessarily blame a curse on some of the misfortune that becomes apparent on the set of The Exorcist. For example, just to give you an idea, he would often shoot guns on set just to get a reaction. And for the pea soup scene, he, despite telling the actor that it was going to hit him in the chest, seemingly got it shot into his face. Now, there's some dispute over whether that was the director's decision or whether or not it was intentional, but regardless, the actor got hit in the face, then he wasn't meant to be. But more severely, for example, at one point he slapped one of the actors across the face. At the very end of the film, a man who was actually a priest in real life is giving the last rites to someone. I'm not going to spoil the film, that's nearly 50 years old. And when he did this, he couldn't get the reaction he wanted out of the priest. So because of that, he slapped him full force across the face, which apparently upset many of the Catholic members of the crew. There was also plenty of injuries on the set. Aside from that, Linda Blair's lower spine is fractured when lacing that the crew had fixed to her for the scene where she was jerked up in the bed came slightly loose, and as a result, her spine was fractured. Again, is that a question of a curse, or is it a question of incompetence? And they actually used that take in the film as well, and it's not the only time they use a take where an actress was hurt, because Ellen Burstyn at one scene is when she's slapped by Regan is also harnessed up, and they just weren't getting the reaction that they wanted. And William Friedkin said to the stunts people, pull really hard on this one, basically give it all you've got. And as a result, Ellen Burstyn was flung across the room and injured. She really hurt her back, apparently permanently. And they actually used this shot in the film. So that scream from Ellen Burstyn when she slapped across the room is legitimate pain. Again, you're pointing more at the director here than any curse. But she seemingly got over it since, but she certainly wasn't happy at the time. Of course, the film leaning into the cursed aspect and disgust only adds to the allure of the film and the possibility that it might actually be cursed. One thing we should mention that could potentially be some sort of evil stemming from the film that led to something quite evil in itself is that there is an actual murderer in The Exorcist. So, For the scene where Regan is having her brain scanned, it was actually based on a procedure that Friedkin actually saw. So because of that, he said, let me get the people who know what they're doing. He got the doctors who he saw perform the procedure the year prior. And one of these was a radiographer called Paul Bateson, who in 1977, years after the film, murdered a film reporter for Variety called Addison Verrill. Bateson called a reporter who wrote about the story, arguing against his labelling of psychopath and that he targeted gay men. He was a gay man himself, as was Addison Verrill. And he was saying that he was an alcoholic, and after going home with Addison after a night in the bar, stabbed him with a knife after beating him with a frying pan. Addison eventually does get some degree of justice because Paul Bateson is found by the police, he's arrested and imprisoned, and there's actually some suggestion, and he apparently claimed that he's responsible for many more deaths of gay men in New York in the 70s, but this has never been verified. So some people may have just been throwing that in to add to the kind of mysticism and the notoriety of the film, and of course that cursed aspect. The film, we should say, and I've discussed this in the YouTube video, it has an unsettling sort of authenticity to it. Even the demon they invoke is based in fact and history. Pazuzu was a demon in Mesopotamian culture, a bringer of storms and drought. Could using a supposedly real demon have led to the film being cursed? It invoked real religion and it embraced evil for the making of the movie. The film went as far as to point that the Pope's insistence of demonology was an important part of Catholic doctrine and that was being ignored. A trailer for the film even led to Caesars, which again adds to the reputation that the film has, and also could it be cursed if it's causing seizures, for example. The movie from the get-go just was warning that seeing the film was going to damage and corrupt you, and that drove people to see it themselves. And when people did see it, it lived up to that reputation of people passing out and throwing up and, fainting. And, for example, is that evidence that it's cursed? But certainly the film didn't exactly steer away from those allegations because it sells. So because of that, it was also banned in many places, which kind of added to the legacy and the myth of the film. And as a result, a certain film that can see that being sacrilegious is not necessarily a bad idea. The film has always had that kind of reputation, and with that idea, could The Exorcist be an affront to God and be at the whim of Satan, and as such, be cursed? Well, this is a tricky one when it comes to explanation or exorcism, because I think I also have to go with explanation, because I don't think you can suggest an exorcism for this one, which is ironic, but some of the worst reported incidents come down to Friedkin's aggressive directing style. And because of that, it's kind of hard to blame it on a curse, unless Friedkin himself was possessed by a demon, who knows. But the film embraced a lot of that kind of hype and the idea that it is cursed or taboo, and as a result of that, it's hard to dispel or even suggest that it might be true or whether it was just slightly embellished. I will say, one of the things that definitely gives me pause is the burning of the sets, except for Reagan's room. That is very creepy. And that is the only thing that gives me pause about whether it's cursed. But overall, I would say that a lot of deaths are explainable or unverifiable. So as a result, I'm going to have to suggest that The Exorcist, there is an explanation, it's not cursed. But one of the next films also deals with the devil, and I think it's probably our best case yet for being a film that might just be cursed. If you make a film about the devil, you're inviting the devil into your life. The religious and spiritual advisor and the person who came up with the idea for the film, Robert Munger, had this view. And this is the person who came up with The Omen. He told filmmakers that the Antichrist would do everything to stop the film from happening. And seemingly around that time, he was trying his best, because just prior to signing on to the film, Gregory Peck's son was found dead of apparent suicide. But that wasn't the end of Peck's troubles with the film. Peck's plane was struck by lightning as he flew to England. The writer David Seltzer's plane was also struck by lightning a few days later. And sticking with planes, a freak accident led to a plane that was chartered for the film being given to someone else. And this plane then crashed, killing everyone on board. But even stranger enough was that the pilot of the plane actually crashed into a car that was driving by the airport that his wife and child had dropped him off and killing them as well, which is just an unexplainable. I mean, a freak accident, to put it bluntly. That's the only word that where it applies here. I mean, the IRA also set off a bomb because this was filmed in London at the time, and they set it off at a bomb near the hotel of producer Mace Neufeld. And it also was very close to happening to him again because he had a table booked for a restaurant, him and his wife, and the restaurant was bombed before they got there. So they were very lucky in some ways, but certainly it feels like some people on the Exorcist set are marked for death. We also should say that one of the Addam handlers who assisted on the film, this was, of course, a scene where baboons attacked the car, which apparently was also, some people suggest, something to do with the curse, that the baboons went crazy and that the car stalled. I don't know if I buy that one. But anyway, one of the Addam handlers on the set, shortly after filming, was killed and eaten by tigers, which some people have said it's lions. I mean, either way, I think it's pretty fucked up. And also, the director, of course, doesn't get away scot-free. Richard Donner received plenty of threatening letters, including one that said his blood will run in the streets. After the film, a special effects supervisor is in a really terrifying, tragic accident that's nonetheless creepy. And this is something that's sort of devolved into urban legend. But before we get to that, I should say another death did occur on the set. Well, not on set. And not a death even. So I guess it didn't. But a stuntman who was involved in the film later on was pushed off a roof during filming of another film, and did survive but was severely injured. But back to our story of John Richardson, the special effects supervisor in the film, who suffered a terrifying tragedy and definitely something that makes me go, okay, this film is cursed. Shortly after, he was filming another film in, I believe it was Norway. Or sorry, the Netherlands, I believe. He was filming a movie and he was driving with his fiancée in a car, and whatever way happened, there was a crash and his fiancée was decapitated. Now again, apparently a lot of people point to it being very similar to that scene in The Omen. And when this happened, if you believe the legend, he comes out of the car and looks at the closest sign, and the sign says Omen, 66.6 kilometers away. Omen spelled O-M-M-E-N. Now, this is where we have to do a bit of fact or fiction. There is a town called Omen in the Netherlands. The accident did apparently take place very nearby. But they don't have signs like that in the Netherlands that say 66.6, apparently. No such sign allegedly exists. But there is a sign that says Omen, and there is also a sign with a couple of sixes in it, or 000, which may have been read as a 6, perhaps in a state of presumably anguish and being totally disoriented. He might have misread it, but certainly being near a town called Omen when this happens would certainly do it, and certainly has added to the legacy of the Omen being cursed. Oh, I should also mention this happened on Friday the 13th. So, explanation or exorcism. This one, I swear to God, man, I'm going to have to say this one needs an exorcism. This is insane. More so than any of the other ones, there's a lot of freak accidents. But put that aside, a lot of the freak accidents here are verifiable. You can look up news reports and see that these actually happen, which isn't always the case with some of the other ones. A lot of these things have been proven to be real. And what's strange, the only reason I would say that maybe it's not cursed is that there are a lot of near misses, that some people survived and there were accidents where people didn't die. And because of that, maybe it's not cursed. In fact, some of the people involved in the film suggest that it's actually blessed because there were so many times where they should have been killed or could have been killed and they weren't. So, I don't know. There's certainly enough weird stuff here and enough terrifying things here that gives me pause and makes me think that there are larger forces at play. There's a lot of eerie and weird coincidences. So far, if I think any of the films are cursed, I think it's got to be this one. Which brings us to the most cursed film of all time. Certainly the most famous one. Poltergeist. One of the most famous cursed films, certainly. In fact, it might even be better known for its curse. It certainly led to the notoriety of the series. It's alleged this curse stems from the film using real skeletons in the scene when they're in a pool of water and skeletons are coming out of the ground. Which, yeah, That's true. I'd heard that multiple times. I thought it was bollocks. I looked it up. It's true. Whew. They actually use real skeletons. And it should be said that they're not the only film that has used real skeletons or even real bodies. Many films have done that. Skeletons have been used in horror films before this and after this. So the question is whether or not that is a legitimate reason. Now, some have suggested that if you actually believe the legend, the skeletons were dug up from graves. Now, I don't know, is this a case of people attributing the actual movie's plot to this? I don't know. That part is not true. These were sourced from a local medical warehouse, allegedly. And in this case, it is that thing where the film's subject matter has sort of lended to this theory that it is cursed, because they are quite similar. The idea that, oh, you desecrated a burial ground, and because of that, you're cursed and haunted. Whereas in the actual, in the production of the film, you use actual skeletons, therefore you've awoken a curse by disrespecting the dead. So, one of the very minor misfortunes we start with, and I should say very minor, is apparently the mechanism for the choking clown malfunctioned and nearly choked the child actor involved, which is very minor. He got off easy based on some of the other people involved, unfortunately. One of the actresses, actually two of the actresses, who were quite young, are killed. The first one is Dominique Dunne. Dominique Dunne is in the first Poltergeist film. She's one of the main kids, or the older of the kids. She's in an abusive relationship, and she's strangled by her boyfriend, which left her in a coma. And a short time later, she is taken off life support. Of course, very tragic, but almost to add insult to injury, the killer only gets 2.5 years for it. Very upsetting, and unfortunately a very real, brutal death that's so avoidable. But does it lead to it being cursed? I don't know. Now, before we get to the one that everyone's familiar with, we should also talk about some of the more minor deaths involved. Poltergeist 2, there's an actor who performs an exorcism on set, hoping to rid of a bad omens or mojo. It's that same actor, I can't remember his name, who's in One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest. He plays Chief in that. He would eventually die of kidney failure and malnutrition at just age 53. So some people point to his young age. And the strangeness of that condition being evidence that he has also been hit with the poltergeist curse. Because when we talk about the poltergeist curse, it's not really just confined to one film. It's confined to the series as a whole, which is quite strange when you compare it to the other films that we talk about when cursed, because normally it's a single film, despite some of them having sequels. Aside from that, there's an actor on Poltergeist 3. Also Poltergeist 2. He does make an appearance in Poltergeist 3, but that's with a death mask, which is kind of creepy. He dies of stomach cancer as well. So, is that a reason? Who knows? Unfortunately, cancer is just a bitch. So, whether or not it's a curse, who knows? But the most famous cursed death probably ever is unfortunately the death of Heather O'Rourke, who appeared across all 3 films. She was sick, but they misdiagnosed what was wrong with her. They believed that she had Crohn's disease, and she was being treated as such. The problem is that she didn't actually have Crohn's disease. If you see, particularly in the last Poltergeist film, her cheeks are quite chubby, and that's because she was taking medication and taking, treatment for Crohn's disease, which she didn't actually have. What she actually did have was a genetic narrowing of her intestines that was never caught. Now, some people have said that there was no way of catching it, but others have disputed this. But as a result, since it wasn't caught, eventually her bowel ruptured and she died of toxic shock at just 12 years old, before Poltergeist 3 was actually finished filming. The film was, as a result, dogged with stories about the Poltergeist being cursed, bringing up the deaths of Dominique and, of course, now the more recent death of Heather. And they just get absolutely harassed with questions about the film being cursed. And eventually the movie comes out, and it's sort of forgotten. It's sort of a black mark because of the death of such a young actress. And it's really because of this that it gets a lot of press about being cursed. This is probably why Poltergeist is talked about so much and is the most famous cursed film of all time, because it happened just before one of the films was even released. And the film is sort of jinxed, or considered jinxed as a result, and a lot of the people involved get absolutely harassed about the curse and whether they think it's real. And it's possibly the best known curse film. It's got a lot of attention, and it's probably added to the film's legacy. To be honest, I don't think the film would be remembered as much if it wasn't for the idea that it was cursed. But that brings me to the question of whether I think it's explainable or whether it needs to be exercised. And to be honest, this is one of the cases where the story of the film is sort of intersected with the curse, and I think kind of added to it. And as a result, it's hard to definitively say for sure. There's plenty of made up elements in the story as well. A lot of people say, "Oh, all the kids in Poltergeist were dead." Yeah, this one died this way, and it's not. It's two of them. And because of that, it feels like people are trying to determine or write that story that this film is cursed, and here's why. And unfortunately, the only two real deaths of note, as much as it's a shame that we lost two other actors, they were a decent age. The ones that make it much more notable is those two young actresses. But connecting it to skeletons seems inconclusive, as other films have done that. And why just the younger ones? Why not some of the rest of the cast? Why were other films not cursed? For example, Apocalypse Now used real bodies. Why? I mean, some people say that film's cursed. Not a lot of people. But why are we not talking about that film in the same breath? And as a result, it's hard to say for sure whether the film is cursed. I think it's likely a case where people wanted to add to that legacy, and because of that, they connect dots that maybe aren't necessarily there. And I think that's also why they kind of reach to say the whole series as opposed to just one entry like they do with most others. So we come to our last film. We said we'd cover 6. This is our 6th film, and then we were ranked the 6th. Rosemary's Baby. A film that's often credited with bringing horror to new heights and away from the gothic castles and creaky coffins of the 50s and before. Rosemary's Baby certainly tackled many satanic elements that could probably help contribute to the cursed nature if you believe in that. We should also recognize that Rosemary's Baby came at a time when a growing fear of Satan and an awareness of satanic ritual and Satanism in general that would continue throughout the 70s and 80s was kind of starting to rear its head. Aside from that, it's not just its themes. There's also even the legend that Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, was involved as an advisor to the film and apparently even played Satan himself in the movie, which are perfect grounds seemingly for evil to make its bed and for this curse to begin. The composer for the film, first off, Christoph Kameda, dies at a party. After a significant fall, he's kind of having a playful push with a friend of his, just kind of messing. But as a result, he falls and is eventually dead after being put into a coma. After 4 months, he's declared dead. The film's producer also was bombarded with hate mail, and he was suddenly struck with kidney stones, and in a delirious hallucination, imagines Rosemary coming for him with a knife, and is apparently shouting about it, if you believe the legend. Now again, are kidney stones a major sign of the film being cursed? I don't know. Certainly the producer's career never fully recovered after this, but whether or not he had a great career before Rosemary's Baby is also probably up for debate. Possibly the biggest thing that people point to is director Roman Polanski, who was, of course, involved with Sharon Tate. He wanted actually Rosemary to be played by his then girlfriend, then and later wife, Sharon Tate, who, of course, if you're aware of your Hollywood history or even unfortunately your true crime history, is eventually killed by the Manson family while pregnant the following year. Tate, I should mention, did appear in the film, although briefly. She was at a party scene, but of course, not a very notable role, especially compared to some of the lead actors. The answer people kind of look for here, when it comes to Sharon Tate's death, is that it's Satanists, or that it must be something to do with Satan. It must be a curse, which is strange because I think it's such a horrible situation, it's such a tragedy, and sometimes because of that we just reach to something so bizarre as a curse or the work of Satan to explain away such real life horror. And this really added to the film's cursed status due to the dealing with the devil. Now, I will also say that there is another satanic conspiracy connected to this film, hold on, we're about to go for a ride. So, one of the theories, and this is sort of legend, that some parts of it are true, but I don't know, again, could be an incident that someone is sort of embellishing. When Tate is killed, the words "Helter Skelter" are scrawled in blood on the wall next to her, which of course is scrawled on the walls in blood where sorry, I should say that name of course came from the Beatles' White Album. I should say that's what I was trying to say. I stumbled. Sorry, these cursed give me the heebie-jeebies. I'm finding it hard to get the words out. So Helter Skelter was written on the walls at the Sharon Tate murders. Of course, it came from the Beatles' White Album, which was conceived in India, where Mia Farrow was actually apparently present. Mia Farrow, who of course plays the titular Rosemary in Rosemary's Baby. Now, years later, Mark David Chapman is in New York with a gun, and he's unsure about carrying out the crime he had planned, which is the shooting of John Lennon. At this point, Lennon is staying in a building called the Dakota Building. And allegedly, if you believe the rumor, Mia Farrow walks past Mark David Chapman. And he takes this as a sign to shoot and kill John Lennon. Because the Dakota Building is famous for being the exterior of Rosemary's apartment and Rosemary's Baby. So when he sees Mia Farrow, he takes it as a sign to kill John Lennon. Which might be a bit of a stretch. Possibly not, but it certainly added to the kind of legend of this cursed, or supposedly cursed, film. So is it an explanation or an exorcism? I think the larger satanic conspiracy is interesting, but I also think it's kind of more of an eerie coincidence, if it's true at all. The murder of Sharon Tate is upsetting, but connecting it to a curse, it kind of seems very in poor taste, to be honest. In fact, that's something we should probably get to in a minute anyway, whether or not this is bad taste, which it could well be. Others have also kind of tried to extend the curse to, say, Roman Polanski's, abuse and Mia Farrow's allegations against Woody Allen. To me, that seems tenuous, and it also would waive them of personal responsibility, which I find disgusting as a thought. And that they basically, they're cursed, that's why they did it. No, they're responsible for their own actions. I think that's people are reaching too far, and because of that, I don't think you can say this is much of a curse at all. It's just a unfortunate tragedy that, in retrospect, we kind of go back and look over, and as a result, try maybe make up stories that aren't there. So, 6 films. I'm going to rank them, as I said, 1 to 6. So, our 6 films. Number 6, least cursed. I'm going to go with The Twilight Zone. As I said, I think this film isn't necessarily cursed. It is just this one horrifying event. And with this event, I don't think it's a curse. I think it's absolute incompetence. And I think John Landis really probably should have gone to jail, along with a few other people, in my opinion. I will say, for legal reasons, he was acquitted. I don't know if that weighs me of any responsibility. Who knows? Next one I'm going to say is Rosemary's Baby at number 5. I just feel like you kind of have to stretch to make that seem cursed. Of course, there's a horrible death, but I mean, would you therefore look at any kind of horrible thing that's ever happened to an actor and say, oh, well, this film dealt with Satan, therefore that's why? I don't know. There's some weird coincidences, certainly, but you could also even chalk parts of that up to kind of 70s Hollywood culture of everyone kind of hanging out together. Maybe, I don't know. So I'm giving that number 5. Number 4, I'm giving to The Exorcist. And I'm giving it to The Exorcist not because of the direction and the aggressive style that William Friedkin has that did lead to injury and things. I'm giving it to it because of the set catching fire and Reagan's room not burning. I find that kind of mysterious and unexplainable. And generally, we were looking for explanations here, and I can't find one for that. I think the problem is also that they leaned into it, so it's hard to tell how true or verifiable some of these are. A lot of people died. Possibly that could be also a reason. But again, 2 of the people that we know for sure died are actors who were, explainable or quite elderly. Number 3, I'm giving to The Crow. As much as I said it doesn't deserve an exorcism, I might actually probably change it for some of these, to be honest. The actual Lee family curse, I don't necessarily believe in, but I do think that the death of Brandon Lee is certainly so many things had to go wrong for that to happen, and certainly a set like The Crow that cut corners definitely led to the possibility that could happen, but so many things had to fail for that to happen, and it's such a shame that it cost Brandon Lee his life. So I would say that could be evidence of a curse. So if someone dies on set, I mean, you're going to start talking about a curse. Number 2, I'm giving to Poltergeist, just because as much as it's easy to say, hey, other films have used skeletons, it's hard to discount the death of 2 young actresses over the course of the series, and whether or not is it about because they use real skeletons, I don't necessarily think so, but I do think that if one of the films here are cursed, I think it's in contention, definitely. I think it's one of the ones that would be higher up that list, and that's why I'm putting it at number 2. The most cursed film I have to give to The Omen. There's so many things here that are more provable than the other ones. Just freak accidents that happened and evidence that someone probably should have died. We're lucky it wasn't a much higher body count. And then we, of course, have someone being killed so close to a sign that reads Omen, which, even if the 66.6 part isn't true, someone being decapitated and standing next to a sign of the Omen is just... that does it for me, man. I think that's... if any of these films are cursed, I'd put my money on the Omen, but certainly a few of these would be very, very scary to have been on the zero, because they definitely seem like there was more evil forces at play. So from number 6 to number 1, Twilight Zone, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, The Crow, Poltergeist, and The Omen. Another thing we should talk about is a film more inclined to be cursed if it's a horror film, if it has that sort of negative spirituality? And I think it has some relevance, because even, like I mentioned, Apocalypse Now had a disastrous shoot, but people don't really talk about that as if it is cursed. A Bond film not too long ago had a lot of production problems, and people kind of said maybe it's cursed, but that was quickly kind of forgotten about, whereas some of these films have been around for decades, and yet people are still talking about the possibility that they could actually be cursed films. Are we just more likely to assume a horror film is cursed? Do we make connections there to kind of add to the scare factor, that the idea that a film isn't just scary within the context of the story, but that there's something scary or evil in the making of the film, in the fact that there are dark forces at play? Does it make it kind of a bit more convenient to imagine that? Or does it even make it more likely, if you're dealing with occult themes, that you could be awakening demons and inviting them into your life? And by that logic, are we kind of imagining things that aren't there, though? I mean, if we're making those connections, is there any chance that we could just be making connections to things that shouldn't actually be connected? Another point we should make is, like, does the devil not have better things to do? I mean, he just wants to fuck around with people on a film set? I mean, if he is Satan and he is all-powerful, why does he not just kill the cast? Why does he not just stop the film from being made? In fact, if anything, it kind of having the cursed moniker on a film has sort of helped these. A lot of these films were incredibly successful, and if he wanted the film to be forgotten and not seen, he probably didn't. He probably helped it succeed. So way to go, Satan. Or maybe that's what he wants. Maybe he wants people to remember the devil and the power that he has, that he can make or break people, or that he can wipe people from the earth and people won't even question it. So perhaps it's in poor taste to chalk something up like a horrible accident or tragic death or even criminal negligence up to some sort of curse. That's probably, in some cases at least, in bad taste, because we're belittling the death of actors, performers, and casts or crew, like essentially at times gave their life for their art. And we're also leaving people who were criminally negligent to the point where people suffered on their sets to get away with it because, hey, it was a cursed production anyway. Or maybe we're doing the opposite. Maybe we're coming up with the idea of a curse because we don't want to accept the horrifying nature of reality, you know, that the world might be random chaos, that maybe there's no God, and maybe if there is a God, he's a malevolent one. Or maybe we're trying to ignore the possibility that in talking about devils and Satan and the occult, that we're inviting evil and devil and curses into our life. For example, maybe if you're listening to a podcast on cursed films, you're more likely to have a horrible fate befall you.
Happy Halloween.
Buddy? I'll try again.